Hey, gang, we're talking All-Americans, but today we're talking Unanimous.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. You everydayers, I applaud you. Thank you for coming to hang out. Greatly appreciate you. And then we need to thank the folks from Birddogs. Rico, tell them about it.
Thanks, DP. Have you ever wondered what life would be like with only one pair of pants or shorts? Well, wonder no more, because Birddogs has the pants for you. They look great, feel great, will have you looking at yourself in the mirror like, damn! Their comfortable, versatile fabric allows you to wear these to work, on the golf course, or even on a hot date. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the code LOCKEDONCollege with your order to get a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler, just like mine. Back to you, DP.
Thanks, Rico. Much appreciated. And folks from Birddogs, my comfy shorts, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate what you do for us at Locked On and Locked On Huskers. I wanted to spend some time deep diving, and then the off season is a really good time for me to get connected to the history of Nebraska football. Sometimes it's a reminder, sometimes it's a refresher, sometimes you're just learning. And through the course of it, we cross in and we have many conversations. Of course, we get to July, we can talk about all-time greats because we would have gone through the process to separate the good players, the great players, the elite players, and the best players. The best players ever at Nebraska. In order to do that, you have to go through, and there has to be a weeding process, the pyramid of greatness and the foundation of it. And then as you get higher, that means that different levels of accomplishment and setting Nebraska records and setting passing records is only valuable if you can compare it to the level of success of previous players at that position. And I want to be clear in that you're measuring players. So the Jordan Russell, the Jordan LeBron type of conversations, for Nebraska speak, it's the conversation between a quarterback who sets a passing record in 2022, how much better is that quarterback than the quarterbacks of his time, of his era, and of the game that's being played at that time? The difference between a starting quarterback at Nebraska in 2023 versus a starting quarterback in 1995. Because some people, as you have the discussion and say, well, if you were starting quarterback, you were a better quarterback than the number 2 quarterback at any point at Nebraska. And that is not a statement of truth, because Nebraska fans I would ask you, would you take any of the last 5 starting quarterbacks at Nebraska, the last 10 starting quarterbacks at Nebraska, over the number 2 quarterback back in the 90s when it was Brooke Behringer? Would you? Like, who would you take? So when you compare eras, be careful, because you can miss some things. Different eras allow for different talent, skill sets, different thinking. As a matter of fact, different play calling. And a player is subject to his play calling. But the real measurement would be, how was he measured in his time and of his era, of like players in the like game? How did he rate and rank compared to the rest of the quarterbacks, running backs, linemen of his time? So you're going to measure Jordan versus the people that played against. How much more athletic was he? How much tougher was he? Measuring Fran Tarkenton versus Lamar Jackson, there's some similarities, but it's a different game and different responsibilities. And some will say, well, the players that they're playing against are faster, bigger, stronger, faster now than they were back when Fran Tarkenton played. But the reality would be, Fran was that much faster, quicker, and throwing on the run, he had skill set that other quarterbacks didn't have because we didn't see it. We didn't see quarterbacks who could scramble and run 30 yards in circles and then throw a 50-yard bomb downfield. That just didn't exist. So you measure time and space. And the easiest way to check this thing out when it comes to All-Americans. And even in the All-American universe, there are different levels and spectrums. Yesterday's episode, we talked about All-Americans versus consensus All-Americans. All-Americans versus consensus All-Americans. Nebraska has had 110 All-Americans. They have had 56 consensus All-Americans. Consensus All-Americans. And I'll reshare what we got, right? A consensus All-American is a player who's listed as a first-team All-American by at least half of the recognized lists, All-America teams that are selected annually for football. A unanimous selection is a player who is listed as first-team All-American by all of those recognized lists. That means every group, whether media, fan, coach, players themselves, or otherwise, everybody agrees. All agree that this is what's in play. So, 110 All-Americans, 56 consensus All-Americans. Before I give the number, I'll ask that you pause and guess. How many unanimous All-Americans has Nebraska, a full-on, verified and confirmed blue blood program, have in all of their years of history? And we know from recent episodes that we're talking going back 110 years. 110 years back to 1914. The first All-American to 2023. 110 All-Americans. 56 consensus All-Americans. No All-Americans since 2011. There are, drum roll, there are 20 unanimous All-Americans in the history of Nebraska football. And I wanted to be sure to set this up in full play because it's not that common. As I said in previous episodes, and I'll repeat it because I want to keep leaving breadcrumbs for conversations, but if before the episode I said how many unanimous All-Americans does Nebraska have, people have a number in their head. The reality is when you figure out that number, yeah, I'm curious because in a future episode I want to compare. I want to compare Nebraska and Oklahoma. I want to compare Nebraska and Colorado, and Nebraska and Minnesota, and Nebraska and Wisconsin, and Nebraska, right? Like Nebraska and Iowa. I want to know what these numbers are in comparison so that we get a full and clear and factual representation of Nebraska football, its glory, its legacy, and its greatness. So we're going to pause here, and then we're going to come back and deep dive into the 20 unanimous All-Americans in the history of Nebraska college football. We'll do that when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Hey gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Again, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Please put your comments down there. If there's one of these lists of sections of great players that you want to go through, I'll take your opinion. You can go through and just in your head right now, before we go through the list, kind of go through who are these unanimous All-Americans? Are you talking about 1 out of 5 of all Nebraska All-Americans? One of 5, or 1 of 5.5, are unanimous All-Americans. That means in all the years of Nebraska football, there are 20 players who have ever been named unanimous All-American. And that's deep water. Now we'll go back in time, right? So unanimous All-Americans. And if I asked you who was the first Nebraska unanimous All-American? Nebraska's first. What year? What year was Nebraska's first unanimous All-American? The year was 1963. The player, offensive tackle Bob Brown, was the first Nebraska unanimous All-American. And Nebraska loved the feeling. They loved the representation. They loved it so much that they had another in 1964. Larry Kramer at tackle was Nebraska's second unanimous Hall of Famer, appropriately so that the big boys lit the path and set the way for greatness at the University of Nebraska. The first two unanimous All-Americans. There was an 8-year gap between the first and the third. Rich Glover, 1971 at middle guard, was Nebraska's third. It was the third player to achieve unanimous All-American status. Johnny Rodgers did it twice. Year he won the Heisman in 1972, he was also a unanimous Hall of Famer. Don't wait long. We like the space that we're in. 1973. Is there a name that comes to mind? 1973. The best player on that 1973 Husker team was one of the best in the country. His name was John Dutton. He played defensive tackle for the Huskers. Rick Bonas, 1975 at center. Unanimous All-American. Roll forward. The first tight end and the only tight end for Nebraska to ever be named unanimous All-American, Junior Miller, in 1979, Nebraska's unanimous All-American. At center, if you want to say unanimous All-American and Nebraska football, Dave Remington did it twice in back-to-back years, 1981 and 1982. Irving Fryer was a unanimous All-American. Mike Rozier, a two-time unanimous All-American. 1984, Nebraska had a unanimous All-American. Do you know the name? Do you know it? Played center. 1984. Following Dave Remington. Mark Trainowitz was a unanimous All-American at center in 1984. 1986, another middle guard, and untalked. If you're going to talk Nebraska football, talk about running backs, talk about pipeline. Listen, middle guard was a dominant position that Nebraska's ever had when Danny Noonan was in 1986, middle guard, unanimous All-American. Again, a name that we don't talk about enough. We'll talk about it more because some Mavericks now part of the program. So, yeah, that's certainly important. And then in 1988, Broderick Thomas, unanimous All-American. I'll put this in play for you. That when you think about great players, great athletes at Nebraska, and then measure them against their era and their time, there are people that we talk about and give credit to as being all-time greats and being and again, it should change the way you have the conversations. Because if you say all-time great Nebraska football and do not talk about Broderick Thomas, you're being disrespectful. You're being absolutely disrespectful. That Broderick Thomas, again, 20 players have been named unanimous All-American. And Broderick Thomas is one of them. And we don't, again, he's just not given the credit. Not given the credit. Do better as we go through it. Now, as we've gone through the list, there are five consensus All-Americans that we haven't talked about. 5. And they are all from that golden age and that golden era. What if I told you that 5 since 1992? There have only been 5. Yeah. Tell me who you think those 5 unanimous Nebraska All-Americans are, and then we will talk about them when we come back to Lock 5 since 1992. We'll go through that list of the Magnificent 5, the Fabulous 5 Huskers when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Hey, gang, welcome back, and thank you for hanging out with me for this episode of Locked On Huskers. Greatly appreciate it. Again, for you folks who do it each and every day, thank you. For those of you who subscribe, those who haven't, please take a moment, click it so we can have these discussions on a regular basis. Greatly appreciate it. Once again, thank the folks from Birddogs for what they do and allowing us to bring this content to you. 5 unanimous Nebraska Hall of Famers since 1991. 5. In 1992, there was one. 1992, there was one Husker. His name was Will Shields, offensive guard, was a unanimous All-American for Nebraska. 1993. The name should be familiar. He's in the news. He's around. Trev Alberts. Trev Alberts was a unanimous All-American at linebacker in 1993 for the Huskers, and appropriate so, one of the top 5 draft picks in NFL draft. 1994, Nebraska was living in unanimous All-American. They were getting their mail there at the unanimous All-American office. 1992 with Will Shields. 1993 with Trev Alberts. 1994. Who do you think it was? 1994. Zach Weger. Offensive tackle Zach Weger was unanimous All-American for the Huskers. 92, 93, 94. 1995 in all of its glory. Tommy Frazier, Aaron Graham, Tomich. None were unanimous. Aaron Taylor in 96? Nope. Consensus, not unanimous. Grant Wistrom in 96. Consensus, not unanimous. Jason Peter in 97. Consensus, not unanimous. Grant Wistrom, consensus, not unanimous. But in 97, Aaron Taylor was a unanimous All-American at guard. 1997. As a matter of fact, he was a consensus in 96, unanimous in 97. And then from 1997, unanimous All-America Incorporated forgot all about the Huskers. They simply lost the address. They misspelled the name or something. That things got lost in the mail. But then it was reborn and reconnected in 2009 with Ndamukong Suh. 2009, unanimous All-America. and then Prince Amukamara. And before you call him Prince Amakamura, straight from his mouth, the correct pronunciation all of these years was Prince Amukamara. Unanimous All-American. He was the last because Levante David was not. He was a consensus, but he was not unanimous. Consensus All-American voters, get your stuff together. And remember, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska. If you lost the mail, there's the address. Find your way. Well, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate you. And again, please take a moment, subscribe. Please get this thing. All right, we're here. Put your comments down in the comment section. If you think I missed something, I'm open to learning. Again, that was the whole purpose behind it to begin with. And if you enjoyed the episode, give me a thumbs up and say, yeah, DP, good stuff. If you didn't like it, just shoot me an email and say, hey, you missed something. If there's something you want me to talk about over the next few episodes, please feel free to reach out and let me know. I'll close out this episode with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.